Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to TechGig webinar series, our endeavor to impart techies. We believe that sharing of knowledge is the key to enhance our skills and grow us as professionals. With this principle in mind, we have initiated a series of webinars conducted by industry experts to give you all a crisp insight of various domains. The topic of today's session is integrating SDLC for medical devices within the quality management system. Our guest speaker today is Mr. Mahadevan J., Lead Auditor, UL Life and Health Sciences. Mahadevan, an electrical and electronics engineer with overall industry experience of 15 years, is a qualified lead auditor for ISO 13485, 2003, ISO 9001, 2008, MDD 9342 EEC, and for Canadian medical device regulations under the CMD-CAS program. He has performed more than 100 audits and has a varied experience of the industry practices. He has a vast experience in product safety evaluation for medical devices and has handled around 100 product evaluations of various types of medical devices. So without further delay, I introduce you all to our guest speaker. Over to you, Mahadevan.
Thank you. Thanks for the introduction. Good evening to all and a good day to all who, in whichever part of the world you are in, and welcome for this webinar. And the topic for this webinar is integrating the software development lifecycle for medical devices within the quality management system. So that's the topic which we are going to discuss. And the presentation will be somewhere around 40 to 45 minutes, and then after that we can have a QA session. We are going to discuss about these topics during the presentation today. Medical device software. What is a medical device software? We are going to discuss about that. And what is the software development lifecycle for a medical device, why it is different, and why we need a specific methodology or a control for a software which is used in a medical device. We are going to talk about classification of software, why it is important, and we are going to discuss on how the software development is, the process of software development is getting interlinked with various other standards and various other regulations. And we are going to also see how to map the SDLC process for medical devices into a quality management system, and where and all within a quality management system framework these requirements will get embedded in. And at the end we will have an implementation example where we will touch upon what is that process and what is that at each phase of the development life cycle we need to consider and we need to look upon for taking the trails to the next phase in the development. Medical device software. What is a medical device software? It's a software system that has been developed for the purpose of being incorporated into the medical device, or that is intended use of a medical device in its own right. So what it means, a software or a firmware which is inside a medical device, or a software which itself can be treated as a medical device. Software system. What is a software system? It's an integrated collection of software items organized to accomplish a specific function or a set of functions. Let us see some examples of software which are considered as a medical device. Software intended to control or influence the function of a medical device. For example, a software which is going to control the complete functioning of the medical device, including its performance and it's related to safety of the device. A radiation treatment planning software. If this software is intended for use with another medical device, this may be treated as an accessory. Example, this radiation treatment planning software generally go along with any of the radiation imaging modality like CT or a nuclear medicine or an MRI, where the images are taken and then based on the images a planning is done about a radiation treatment. Next example, software intended for the analysis of patient data generated by a medical device for view to diagnosis or monitoring. A typical example is picture archiving and communication system, where you take the patient data generated by a device, mostly X-rays, CTs, MRIs, and then offline you view that for diagnosis or monitoring to take for further treatment. Another example, software intended to assist diagnose or treat a physical or mental condition. Then you have a software which is a component or an integral part of the device. This is where the embedded software which goes inside to control plenty of medical devices which is there in the market. Some examples, patient monitors, ECGs, BP apparatus, ventilators, X-ray machines, MRIs, all of these medical devices, it contains this embedded software to control the functionality and the performance of the device. How this software and hardware are interrelated. Even if a software is packaged separately from the hardware as an operating system, example we can see as the picture archiving and communication system, where it's only a software which can be packaged separately. The manufacturer of that packs need to identify and look at the various means in which the device can fail due to the supporting hardware structure. So examples are the PC architecture in which the the program has to run. It needs to support if there are any issues with respect to the operating system and the handshake with the DLLs and administrative control, the information based on the information security, environmental conditions, in which environment the hardware will be placed, example the electromagnetic interference, and misuse through others, hacking, virus protection, etc. So the manufacturer of the software need to consider all these areas where the hardware is going to play an important role in the functioning of the software. Safety related software. So as I said earlier, the software is being an integral part of the medical devices nowadays, where all the devices are controlled either by an embedded system or there are remote monitoring and diagnosis where you have other means where the data is communicated and viewed remotely as well. So first thing, we need to identify whether the software is attributed to the safe and effective functioning of the medical device, or it is playing an important role in determining the diagnosis of an image. To do that, we need to first determine the intended use of the software. What is the role of the software in the whole medical device or in the healthcare delivery chain? that needs to be determined. Based on this determination, you need to analyze the software from a physical and a logical perspective to determine if they are related to safety and effective performance. Physical and logical perspective, physical again it involves with respect to the hardware, and that's where the physical attributes of a safe functioning of a software comes in. Categorization of software into risk levels for application of risk mitigation. How to categorize the software based on the risk levels, we will be going in the few slides, we will be discussing that. Software can start as a safety critical, but through a risk management process, it can be designed inherently safe and become not safety related. So what this means is you will start thinking that software is very critical for this type of application, but there are various other control mechanisms which can be adopted. So at the end of your development cycle, it may even come as it is not critical to safety. This diagram will help in understanding what is safety related and what is non-safety related. We have given few examples of what is safety related and what is non-safety related. Software that implements a risk control measure, that means software which is having any controls to compensate for any hardware failures or to detect any hardware failures and raise flags. Software failures, similarly any misbehavior within the software and then raising the flag, misuse or use errors, those things are all safety related. And software that implements the essential performance of the device. This means the software which is directly influencing the performance of the device. For example, X-rays, CTs, MRIs, and other products where the software is going to play a critical role in determining the performance of the device. So these things come as safety related. What could be a non-safety related? Non-safety related could be that don't have any side effects on safety related software. So once you have identified safety related and non-safety related, it will be easier to deploy the controls appropriately. So we have discussed about what is a medical device software. We saw about what are all the examples of medical device software and what is safety related and what is non-safety related. Now we are going to discuss about software development lifecycle for medical device. Firstly, I would like to discuss on why there is a specific requirement for a lifecycle process for medical device. As I said, medical device software is playing a huge role in controlling the medical device with respect to safety and performance, which is directly going to impact the patient who is getting the care from the care provider. So software is an integral part of the medical device technology nowadays. So safety and effective functioning of the medical device, it needs to be looked at from the process point of view, how it has been developed, how it has been controlled, and how it has been released, and how the feedback mechanism works to maintain the software effectively. So there is one IEC international standard called IEC 62304, which defines the software lifecycle process for medical devices. What this standard talks about is it gives a framework for lifecycle process. It gives the requirements for what are all the activities and tasks to be performed while developing the software, and the interlinks with risk management. And it has requirements for classification, and it has got requirements for overall control of the process. We are going to discuss about all these things in the coming slides. Before going into those details, we will try to understand about few concepts of life cycle. What is a life cycle? Life cycle is going to help in breaking down the design of the product into phases to various design levels. And this ensures higher level parts of the design are fulfilled before it goes down to the next stage. So that means the output of one stage is becoming an input to the next stage. And this methodology will also allow verification of the output requirements of one stage to the next stage before the bug gets transmitted to a later stage. And this is one life cycle model what the standard is prescribing. It starts from the customer need. Customer could be an external customer or your own internal customers. Then the process starts. First thing is the system development activities, which includes risk management. Then there is a subset of risk management. And in the development activities, it is further broken down into various activities and tasks. Development planning, requirement analysis, architectural design, detailed design, coding testing, integration testing, system testing, release. After the release, there is a software problem resolution, that is your bug fix and the management. And of course, throughout the process, there is the configuration control, which is given as the configuration management there. And finally, once the software is released, it goes back to the customer with the customer needs satisfied. The common life cycle models which has been used across the industry, specifically for medical devices, are water flow model, incremental model, and evolutionary model. So there has been a lot of write-ups and all those stuffs which are available freely in the web on these models, and which is good, which is bad. It all depends on the situation in which the development is happening and based on the requirements. Irrespective of the model which it's been used for development, there are certain principles which is to be followed for medical devices. It clearly specifies, the standard clearly specifies that all the outputs should be maintained in a consistent state. That is, whenever any process output is created or changed, all related outputs should be updated promptly to maintain their consistency with each other and to maintain all dependencies explicitly or implicitly. What this means? This means whatever the changes which you are doing throughout the process at whatever be the stage, you need to review it completely and then see the overall impact and then take actions wherever it is needed to update. So if it requires for you to go back to redefine your requirements from a testing phase, you need to do it. So that's what in a nutshell it means. And it also talks about medical device software release. So before it is released, means before it is put in use, all the outputs should be consistent with each other, and all dependencies between the process outputs explicitly or implicitly has to be verified and ascertain it is meeting the requirements before it is released. So we discussed about why a software development lifecycle model is required for a medical device, and what are all the various practices which is there in the industry, and why it is critical for a medical device. Now let us discuss about classification of medical device. Firstly, why this software safety classification is required. This requirement is largely driven by various regulatory bodies for the medical device. To name a few, the US FDA has got certain requirements on classifying the software, and for the European Union also there are requirements to classify the software. In FDA terminology, the classification is slightly different, which I'll be explaining, and with European Union, the classification is slightly different. In this slide, what you are seeing now is with respect to the European model. So the manufacturer means the manufacturer of the software shall assign each software system a software safety class. So in the Europe, it is class A, class B, and class C. These three classifications are there. In the US under FDA, it is called as class 1, class 2, and class 3. So that is the correlation with US and the European model. So what if I don't know how to classify? It is very simple. You need to define what the software is intended for. From there, you need to make certain assumptions and start taking those classification. And once you follow this process, at the end of your development life cycle, you will be very clear on what is your classification is. And if there are additional hardware support mitigation which is available to take care of any failures in your software, then the classification can be downgraded by one level. So software consists of plenty of things. It consists of various modules, right? It consists of various subsystems, or it consists of various items within the software system. So what is a system approach? So first you start from a system level approach, you make that classification, and then further you break down that system into each component of the system, and each component of the system can be classified on its own. So we have seen what is a software classification and why it is important as well. How this software development lifecycle is interrelated with other standards which are applicable for medical devices in general. So most of you may be familiar with a standard called ISO 13485-2003, which is the standard for quality management systems for medical devices, which is specifically for regulatory purposes. The next standard is ISO 14971, which is for the application of risk management to medical devices. This risk management is very specific for medical devices. Why it needs to be specific for medical devices is it is dealing with the patients. Medical devices interact with patients and also with other stakeholders are involved. So it needs to be looked upon in a different perspective. So that's why there is a standard on how to go about with risk management for medical devices. And if the medical device is an electrical equipment, of course, whenever there is a software, this is considered as a medical electrical equipment, and the requirements to be fulfilled are IEC 60601-1. The current edition is edition 3.1. So these three standards discuss about the software part of it. This diagram will help you in understanding how the interrelations are. This IEC 62304 is the standard which we discussed some time back, which prescribes the software development lifecycle process for medical device software. And we also saw ISO 14971, we also saw ISO 13485-2003, and we also saw IEC 60601. There was one standard called IEC 60601-1-4. this standard is obsolete now, and this standard is being replaced by combination of 14971, 60601 and 62304. So 62304 specifies the software lifecycle processes, and the erstwhile 60601-1-4 was talking about programmable electrical medical system, which is obsolete now. These requirements are considered through the other standards. And 60601-1, medical electrical equipment, general requirements for safety and essential performance. So you see, we were discussing about software which is playing an important role in safety of the medical device and also on the essential performance of the medical device. So this standard 60601, under one particular subsection, there is a detailed requirements given on software development processes, which is again linked to IEC 62304. 13485-2003, this is the quality management system standard, and 14971 is the risk management standard. So while developing a software for medical devices, we need to consider all these, the requirements from all these standards, and integrate the process within the quality system so that the resultant product, medical device software, is compliant to these standards. This flowchart will help in better understanding further about the linkages. So we have medical device process standards IEC 62304, and this standard, there is a requirement in this standard that the medical device software manufacturer need to have a quality system in compliance with 13485, and the manufacturer also need to have a process in place for risk management which is in compliance with 14971. So that way the interlinkages is there with respect to 62304 and the quality system standard and the risk management standard. So next thing, whether the software is going to affect on the safety and performance of the medical device, then you need to have the compliance to 60601 as well. So the level of compliance is depending on the software classification. For example, if the software is classified under the severe classification as class C, then all the requirements in the standard 62304 are applicable. If it is classified as class B, then few requirements, 3 or 4 requirements are exempted. If it is a class A, which is not of significant role with respect to medical device safety and performance, there are very minimum requirements which need to be complied with. To understand it better, we need to see about this process approach, which is a backbone of any quality system. So process approach, what it talks about is the requirement from the customer or from the regulatory authorities, and then that is to be realized. That means it needs to be developed and systems to be put in place to make a product, which could be a software or it could be an end medical device as well, which should meet the customer and the regulatory requirements. So in this, you need to have a management who is responsible and committed to make the device which is going to meet the customer and regulatory requirements, and also you need to have the resources in place to do the development activities and other stuff. And also as an improvement, you need to have the feedback from the customers and take actions so that you have your product and your systems is effective and continues to meet the requirements. So this is a brief, very brief overview about the process approach. Let us see how this process approach is linked with the life cycle model which we discussed earlier. We saw in process approach, it starts with customer and ends with customer. Here you see it starts with the customer need and also ends with the customer needs satisfied. So once you need to have a process in place, that's what we saw in a process approach. So the process here is described clearly, system development activities, which includes risk management and also a clear defined methodology of planning, analysis, design, testing, and release. So that is how the development is to take place for a software. The primary requirements from 62304 standard, it clearly specifies the manufacturer of the device shall demonstrate the ability to provide software that consistently meets customer requirements and applicable regulatory requirements. This can be demonstrated by use of quality management system in conformance with ISO 13485-2003. So this gives a direct link of SDLC process to a quality management system requirements. The next requirement in the standard specifies manufacturer shall apply a risk management process in conformance with ISO 14971. Let us see the mapping of requirements with various standards now. Let us start with risk management standard. Risk management standard is 14971 and it talks about a methodology in identifying the foreseeable hazards, estimating the risks, implementing the risk control measures, verifying those things, and finally having a report to ascertain that the risks are within the control, and also on a post-production, that means post-release monitoring of the performance and taking actions to maintain the acceptable risk levels. So these are all the main requirements in the risk management process. How this is linked with the requirements in the SDLC standard, identifying of non-foreseeable hazards. Here it is talking about analyzing the software contributing to hazardous situations. Analyzing software contributing to hazardous situation is what happens if the software failures, what if the hardware failures, what is the hardware support which is there for the software, if what happens if it fails. So these type of things, hazardous situations, you need to analyze and then see what is the impact. Estimation of risk for each hazard. So this is based on the impact. We need to classify the software based on the intended use of the software, based on the analysis, what are all the hazardous situations, what can happen, and what mitigations you put. Based on those, the software classification is done. And implementation of risk control measures. So here the risk control measures implemented in software and verification of the same. So you need to take those inputs from the risk control, whatever you have identified, into your requirements, into your architect design, into your coding stage, and into your verification stage by having appropriate test cases and verify those risk control measures. Risk management report, here it talks about the traceability of the requirements, where you need to identify the critical requirements and then need to demonstrate where it has been, how it has been considered down the line in the design, how it is verified, and to those report references. Post-production information, here it is discussing about risk management of software changes. So once the software is released, whatever the changes which you are going to do in the software, there is certain maintenance process which is pretty similar to the development process, has to be done for medical device software. Now let us look into how to map these requirements into the quality management system. Quality management system, we saw the product realization is one of the key process in the process approach diagram which we have seen. So product realization, during product realization, having risk management as per 14971 is also a critical requirement in 13485. So similarly, what we saw in the previous slides, this is taken care by the software classification, analyzing the software contributing to hazardous situation, risk control measures, risk management verification, risk management of software changes. Then let us go into the design process. Design process in the standard quality management system, it clearly specifies through a PDCA, that is plan, do, check and act methodology. So you need to do the plan first, you need to determine the inputs, you need to do the design, you need to identify what is your deliverables, you need to develop the product. During the development product, you will have various checks and balances through reviews, and then you have your verification and validation to ensure whatever you have started is the one which you have made. So that is in brief about the design process requirement in the quality management system standard of ISO 13485. How this is related into your SDLC, we will see now. Software development planning. So there is a clear requirement of software development planning. So before you start the activity of going into an actual development, you need to have a clear plan in place. What are all the elements which has to be mandatorily there in the software development plan is detailed out in the standard itself. You need to identify the team, you need to identify the process model which you are going to follow, you need to identify how you are going to control the configuration, you need to identify how you are going to verify, you need to identify the risk management methodology, how you are going to go about. So all these elements are mandatorily to be there in the software development plan. Then inputs, requirement analysis. The standard clearly specifies what are all the things which you need to mandatorily consider as requirements in the software development and how to review these requirements and how to identify critical requirements. That methodology is also clearly given in the standard. Then as per your workflow model, it flows, you have the requirements defined, then you go into an architectural design, then you go into a detailed design, then you go into an implementation and verification plan, and then integration and test plan. So this is how you go about with respect to the inputs and the actual design part of it. What are all the design outputs you give? Design outputs are all your process documents what you have followed, and finally the build what you make is an design output over here. Review, there are various methods in which you can do the reviews. That is absolutely depending on your style of functioning, but you need to have reviews at appropriate stages so that you can catch hold of any corrections or any fine-tuning or any adjustments to be done at the beginning stage itself, which is going to help you in the meeting the timelines as well. Verification activities and validation activities, we have the software system testing, software system release, and software modification implementation, which is also related to design and development change requirements. So design and development changes also need to be controlled based on the quality management system requirements. So how we are going to do that is we need to establish a maintenance plan, and also we need to have a clear configuration control which is linked to the identification and traceability of the product. So you need to have the configuration control in place. And the quality management system, we saw we need to take the feedback and take actions to maintain an effective system. So those requirements are addressed through the software problem resolution process. So you need to have a clear methodology of reviewing the feedbacks, analyzing it and taking appropriate action, and if required going to the maintenance part of it or into the modification analysis phase and then implement those changes. So we saw in the process approach diagram there is a key role from the management to demonstrate the commitment towards compliance to the standard requirements. So we need to have a risk management policy which is similar to that of your quality policy, with maybe with a specific focus to software. You can have it. And what is that level of risk as an organization we are ready to take with respect to the acceptance, and who has got what authorizations, that needs to be clear, and providing adequate resource. Our adequate resource includes the relevant infrastructure and the team to develop the products in an effective way. And also they need to be part of the reviews at critical phases and then to ensure it has been going in a right manner. It is ultimately the manufacturer, the top management of the manufacturing company is responsible for the safety and effective performance of the device in the market. So to that effect, they need to have the commitment and provide adequate directions to the team to perform the activities. So when it comes to providing resources, need to have appropriate training by means of academic qualifications, by means of on-job training, and by means of other training. The person who is performing an activity has to be appropriately trained to do that activity. So you need to have certain documentation to demonstrate this capability. So this is an overall brief on how the quality system is mapped with respect to the SDLC process, which is for the medical devices. Let us quickly go through an implementation example. Typically, the development process, be it software or be it any product, it goes through these stages. So define the requirements, design, implement, verify, validate, install, maintain, decommission, in some cases, feedback, and then it goes in a cyclic manner. Once you, based on the feedback, you go and improve, and it goes in a cyclic manner. Let us see for the key phases, what are all the inputs to that process, what activity to be done, and what are all the deliverables. In the requirements phase, first thing need to consider is the customer needs, intended uses, risk analysis, what technology you are using, and of course what regulatory requirements are applicable. What we do a technical adoption, we do an hazard analysis, we take hazard mitigation decisions, and we discuss with the management and then see how we can go about. The outputs are requirements that meet the customer needs, requirements that address the identified hazard, specifications that are clear and usable for the next stage of development. Design phase, the output from the requirement phase is taken here. That's the requirement specifications. You do a high-level software design. You address all the hazards by means of your design methodologies. You do the architecture, modularization, partitioning, interfaces, and also you do the reviews. So the deliverables at this phase are block diagrams, control flow, how the data flows, and how the data interfaces are there. So which are safety critical software, which are non-safety critical, what hardware software interface is there, what software interface is there, what user review interface is there. So all those things comes into this phase. In the implementation, based on the design architecture and based on the coding guidelines which are available, you go ahead and write the coding and use the coding language what you have identified, and you do certain amount of functional testing at that stage, and you have the source code, the data dictionary, libraries, test results, etc. So the installation phase, the implemented code, you take it further, and then you integrate with the hardware, and then you do a performance test there and validate the requirements against the intended use, and the output is the complete product test results, and the customer acceptance. Maintenance phase, you have the complete product, and then you have the user training, routine maintenance like by means of patch upgrades and all those stuffs. Complaint handling, if there are any specific complaints, then you take that feedback and then further analyze and then issue and patch upgrade or what actions to be taken. It could be a new software version, and when you go through that, you do a regression testing to ensure that the complete software is working fine. So the output over here is a re-engineered product or maintenance logs, the test reports related to those things. Lifecycle integrated activities. So these activities are integrated at all the phases of your SDLC. Verification planning, configuration management, document control, problem resolution, and risk management. These activities cut across all the phases in your development lifecycle. When you have a requirement, you need to plan how to verify that requirement. So that is verification planning. Configuration management is how you will identify the items and how you identify the codes, from when you will start controlling the configuration. Document control, of course, you need to have the controls in place whenever you go and revise the related documentation. Problem resolution, how you will handle your bug fix activities. And of course, risk management, right from the requirements identification, right from the intended use till the software, till the end of life of the product, the risk management activities are applicable. Verification planning, plan for each defined lifecycle phase. And you can plan when you are in a requirements phase, you can clearly specify how you are going to verify the requirements and how you are going to do it, what tools you will be using, what are all the acceptance criteria, and what is that you will be delivering. And you will do the test for functionality, performance to challenge the system, all those things. Configuration management, first you need to have a plan in place on how do you control the configuration, you need to have the procedures, you need to identify who is the responsible person to do this activity and how you will identify and what are all the things which you are going to control and how the control number, version and all the unique identification will be done. And with respect to modification, change control and problem resolution, you need to also include the off-the-shelf software or any other software which you are not sure whether it has gone through these processes. And for software items which are having class B or class C, these to be documented under configuration management before verification. As I said earlier, if it is a class A, most of the requirements are not applicable, so you can clearly see configuration management requirement for a class A is not that critical. And you need to establish traceability right from your hazard analysis stage till your verification validation document and also in the maintenance phase of the software. Document control, again you need to have the level of documentation which you will be using, what media we will be using, how to plan and approve the documents, how to distribute, and what is the methodology which you have to maintain and who has the responsibilities. These things you need to define. We saw 3 standards which the SDLC process is linked with. We discussed in detail about the risk management. We discussed in detail about the quality management system. The third standard which we have to discuss now is on the medical electrical equipment, the requirements for basic safety and essential performance. So in this standard, there is one particular section in the standard which talks about the software. So again, this requirements are based on the risk classification of the software. So once you classify the software, what are all the requirements from 62304 are to be complied with is defined in the standard itself. And this standard also gives a guidance of a methodology which you can adopt. This is a very familiar and famous across the software industry, which is called as the V model, where you start from the user needs and then drill down to the requirements and then go down into the go deep dive into your design documentation, and then you actually do and implement the code and then verify. So in this process, you go down in deep in the design and then come up with respect to your verification and validation. So now we have covered with respect to the slides. We can go ahead for questions if there are.
Well, thank you so much for the session, Mahadevan. I have started assigning you the questions. I hope you can see them.
Yes, yes, yes. Okay, the first question is Sudha Krishna Basu. I hope I have spelled it, pronounced it right. For assuring, reviewing medical device SDLC and implementation related activities, is ISO 13485 training and certificate an essence? Well, we have seen through the presentation how the SDLC process and the 13485 requirements are closely interlinked. So to demonstrate that you have quite a good control with respect to the process, yes, you need to have a training and certification. The next question is Shaurya Bhatnakar. Can a web portal application used simply to display readings gathered from a medical device be considered as a medical device software or a medical software? Is it possible to use agile methodology in development of such software application? See, methodology, any methodology can be used for software development application as long as it meets the process requirements given in the 62304 standard and also into the quality management system standard. The second part of your question, can a web portal be a medical device? What is that web portal functioning? It is just only taking data from a remote server and then displaying. What is that? And to this effect, you need to also consider the data integrity and the interface with respect to the cloud or to the server, how the interoperability with respect to these devices are. So these are all certain critical factors need to be considered to determine whether it is a medical device or not. What is the documentation required for Class B and Class C software? This question is from Sanjay Amritkar. Well, the documentation requirements for Class B and Class C software, it's very clearly given in the standard itself. Under each requirement of the standard, at the bottom of the requirement, you will see in the brackets Class A, B, C. That means it is required for all three classes. If you see Class B, C, then it is only required for Class B and Class C. To further help you on this in the standard, if you look at in IEC 62304, Annex A of the standard, there is a table which gives the details for which classification, which requirement is applicable. So once you go to that requirement, that will give you what documentation to be maintained. Okay, there is one question from PV Shivakumar. Like ISO 13485, is there a certification for 62304? Well, currently there is no certification for 62304, but there are methodologies where you can have a third-party assessment done and get a report for complying to the 62304. Do we have any SIL to check software as a part of QC or QA? This is from Srinivas Reddy Patola. Do we have any SIL to check software as a part of QC and QA? Well, I am not clear what is that you mean by SIL here. So maybe I'll try to answer that later. One question from Manigandan Nagarajan. What is the industry standard for defect density in healthcare? That is number of defects per kilo lines of per 1,000 lines of code. Well, this is depending on the criticality and depending on the individual's processes. There are no set standards as such that this is the acceptable level of defects with respect to medical device software. What is the documentation for Class B and Class C software? What is the documentation? Okay, this I think we have discussed. Well, coming back to the question on SIL, do we have, that is from Srinivas Reddy Patola, do we have any SIL, that is safety integrity level, to check software as a part of QC and QA? Well, there are various methodologies which the various companies are practicing with respect to QC/QA activities for medical device software, and as such there are no set limits which they have specified, but the rigor in which the verification protocols are run varies from companies to companies and with respect to the classification of the software. Okay, there is one question from Sairam. What is the typical duration for demonstrating the compliance and getting the certification? Well, it depends on the experience of the team and the understanding level. And if the company has got previously established methodologies and processes in place, adopting the SDLC process for medical devices, that shouldn't take much of a time, because if you look at from a CMM point of view, you have right from the requirements till the delivery, you have the set processes, and these things are getting to be overlaid over those processes. So the foundation is set. So you need to add those deltas. So that shouldn't take much of a time. Web-based, one question from Mr. Shivakumar PV. Web-based pathology solution for viewing, managing, and sharing digital glass slides. Will it come under medical device purview? Very good question, interesting one. Web-based pathology solution for viewing, managing, and sharing digital glass slides. So that means what I assume and what I understand from what you have written is it is a portal where the digital glass slides can be shared with various people for viewing, managing. If that being the case, it could be under medical device, because it is something similar to the packs which we discussed some time back. Yeah, there is one question from Nishant. Are there any standards which quantitatively defines maximum risk level for a software? There are no standards which quantifies the risk level. It depends on the intended use. It depends on the hazardous situation in which they can fail. It depends on what is the impact if it fails, and also it depends on the probability of failure.
Thank you so much, Madhavan, for answering the questions. Those were the only questions we had for this session.
Okay.
Thank you so much for the presentation as well. It was a great session. I would also like to thank all our participants for their support in making this webinar a success. I would like to inform you all that the recording of this session would be available on techgig.com by tomorrow. Thank you all. Have a great evening.
Thanks all the participants. Bye.